The Bologna Process. Since 1999, it has become the overarching framework that is meant to radically change the national educational systems of Europe. Upon conception of the process, the deadline was set to 2010, and many expected a straightforward process of reform. However, it has not been viewed with neutrality. Often treated as a welcomed reality, but equally often as an outrageous development, the Bologna process has changed the world of students and other academics alike. The perspectives on Bologna vary from person to person and from one stakeholder to another. Governments, academic leaders, business leaders, and undoubtedly so, students. Students are the ones seeking to preserve their right of free education as a public good and to fight down barriers denying them access. Student reactions to Bologna-branded reforms developed into renewed waves of student activism. Perceived threats to academic freedom, deprivation of social rights and unfair education. All of these have been labeled under the Bologna tag. Is this the result of flawed policies, a blame game, or is it a problem of excessive attachment to the old system of education? This is what students and student representatives have been debating in the past couple of years. What we are trying to do here is to go to the roots, to bring to you everyday witnesses of the changes set within the Bologna process. Bachelor's and master degree students from around Europe. They speak from a position in which policy becomes obsolete unless turned into action. The question thus remains: have the changes produced at the highest levels trickled down to have an impact in the educational process itself? International mobility is perhaps one of the flagships of the Bologna process. The numbers of students going to study abroad has risen continuously in the past few years. Yet, the picture is far from rosy. Despite improvements, mobility programs still face obstacles that at the end of the day prevent mobility rates from rising faster.
I think it's important when reforms are done at national level that this overarching aim of mobility is always kept in mind, and that we in the next phase make an extra effort on really introducing reforms that facilitate mobility and allow students of all backgrounds and ages to be mobile across Europe.
In terms of money, the Erasmus grant is really helpful. It's just there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in getting the grant. There are so many forms to fill out. They take so long.
It becomes so much harder to find the right person to talk to because of the language barriers, because of the different procedural works, and sometimes I guess many Erasmus students experience a lack of integrity into the university's life, and especially during the first few months in the new place.
Things have changed. They want me to study quickly, and so for me to go abroad, I really need a good mobility window, and that would be a deal breaker. If I don't get that, I think it's not my first priority. I wouldn't do it.
On internationalization in universities around the world, and one of the findings shows that one of the most important obstacles to mobility in Europe, and in particular in Europe, remains recognition of degrees and diplomas and periods of study. So on the one hand, the Bologna process was designed to make mobility more easy and make the system more transparent, and yet we see this persistent problem of recognition.
We have all these fancy ideas about how it's going to be, but it's hard because you always have to figure everything out for yourself. And if you go out, it's not always you get your education recognized when you come back home. But it's supposed to work, and it's getting better.
It is always very expensive. Only getting there can be too much for a student to pay. So grants or subsidizing programs are really necessary, and most of the time they're not at all covering the costs that you will be facing.
While the rising clout of mobility programs such as Erasmus has been a significant change over the past decade, other areas have seen less noteworthy progress. Policy-wise, quality assurance has been one of the major pillars of the Bologna process and implementation. Going to campuses presented another reality, that of students seriously concerned with the quality or methods of teaching used at their universities. Furthermore, from the comments, the infrastructure leaves much to be desired.
Well, I think the Bologna process has launched a real debate about the issue of what kind of teaching we need for the future, how we improve quality. And I think that now the process is launched, we're going to see a kind of natural development as more and more institutions and societies adapt to the culture of teaching, meeting learner needs. So learner-centered education is going to become the norm.
A high school way of teaching things, which doesn't really work on a university level, because you have much bigger classes and people are more about working and learning for themselves, and not like high school people see it like we have to do it. So yeah, personally in my courses I didn't like the teaching or the methods. In my mobility experience, the classes were great, and I loved the way they were teaching. There was a lot of practical classes.
Teaching people or teaching students, they're not making them think. So a lot of times it's that teachers or professors are giving out the information and are expecting the students just to know it right then. But they don't make students learn as much by themselves or within groups.
In my home country, we consider professor being somebody almost equal to a god, and the distance between the students and university professors are really big, unfortunately. But now I am in a different education system, and I should say that it's really nice to have a dinner with your professor. It's really nice just to have a nice, friendly chat with him before the lecture. And I believe that that's the main difference of the methods, because the relationship between students, between the students and professors is very, very different in the different countries. So if the God professor has a tendency just to make a slide presentation to point out the main things, the professor in another country could provoke the interesting discussion that could give up even better results than just pointing out the dots on the slides.
Some courses are good, much of them are really good, and they're practical, they're not too big, the courses are not too big, but other seminaries, there are many people inside and it's kind of noisy, and we're not learning that much.
You've been so used to having teachers around, and then all of a sudden you come to university, and if you're left completely alone, if there's no in-between, if there's no period of where you're like, okay, fine, I have to get used to this kind of way of learning, then it can be very difficult, and you're not going to get the most out of students because they're going to be scared most of the time. They're going to be too worried to do any real work, to put their all into their work and to come out with good grades.
What I personally feel is that professors are not really good at teaching. You know, they're really good at what they know, but to convey this message to the students, I think there needs some improvement.
One of the main characteristics of the student body in Europe is its huge diversity. People of all ages, nationalities and social backgrounds are studying in higher education institutions. Unfortunately, as accessible as education may seem, many are those who do not desire to go abroad or to have comparable degrees across Europe, but merely to have the opportunity to study. To date, not all social groups are equally present in this diverse but not fully representative student body.
What we've tended to ignore is that the last decade has seen the most significant rise in participation in higher education that we've ever